Anita?
Hey y'all. I'm one of the safe authors. I could visit you with talk of sample size and different auditing strategies. That's not my gig here today. I'm going to be talking about transparency in post-election audits. And it's sort of ironic, I've never participated in one myself. I've tried to be a good listener to experiences around the country. I've tried to listen closely to the concerns of citizens around the country, reflecting on elections that they suspect may not have gone so well. And I also bring my professional training as a political scientist to bear, although most of what I have to share there I think is probably intuitively obvious, which is pretty much what political scientists do. I'm going to give you just quickly one slightly different take on transparency. I went to Transparency International. I wanted to know what they thought it was. And basically, transparency entails that citizens can know facts and figures, mechanisms and processes of election administration, right? And it entails that civil servants act visibly, predictably, that's important, and understandably. So that tells you right up front that transparency in post-election audits and in election administration is going to take work because the stuff you do gets really complicated. It is not inherently transparent. So a lot of work needs to be done in structuring the systems. A lot of work needs to be done in building lines of communication between citizens and election officials. And this, to some extent, goes against the grain. A lot of citizens, in my experience, are annoying. I didn't put that in my notes. You know, they ride hobby horses that they shouldn't. They get stuff stuck in their brains and you can't get it out. And the temptation to control information is extreme. The perennial lesson of political science, I would say, one among many, is that openness provides channels for collaboration and secrecy creates enemies. I don't want any election officials in the room to be making enemies. I imagine that's why you're here. So to figure out how to make transparency work for everyone, that's going to be important. Now, I wanted to spend, in contrast to what Mark Halverson said, I wanted to spend a few minutes discussing a catastrophe for auditing. And luckily, this example wasn't actually an audit. It was the 3% annual recount in Ohio after the presidential election. Should have been pretty powerful. You know, it couldn't have resolved all the questions about the 2004 Ohio election, obviously, but it could have settled some crucial ones. The sample size was good, 3%, that could be good. Part of the directive from Secretary of State Ken Blackwell was that if the manual count did not exactly match the machine count in each county, officials were supposed to recount every vote by hand. Now, Ken Blackwell made a lot of controversial decisions in 2004, but this just might have been the absolute worst, in my opinion. And you know, it sounds pretty good. It's zero tolerance, it's going to be really rigorous. But we all know small discrepancies, usually one-off errors, are going to be really, really common in hand counts. They can happen for all kinds of reasons. You know, we need to report them, we need to record them, we need to scrutinize them, we need to try to explain them. We need to consider process improvements. In some cases, in very close elections, we might actually have to recount everything by hand. But that shouldn't necessarily be the rule. And by making that the rule, especially in the case of a recount that began after the election had been certified, election officials, you know, had to figure that one-off errors weren't going to matter much to the election, but they would be a huge problem for the election officials. Okay, so you don't need a PhD in political science to figure how the election officials might respond to these perverse incentives. The 3% manual recount was, it was not well handled. Some counties pre-selected their precincts or otherwise desperately compromised this concept of random selection. Posted what the results should be to help their counters get the right numbers. And of course, in Cuyahoga County, not only were the precincts pre-selected, but the votes in those counties, in those precincts, excuse me, were pre-counted in order to make sure that the right result was obtained. And 2 election workers did go to prison as a result of that. Now, I think this is catastrophic because my own opinion from scrutinizing the vote counts in Ohio is that, with caveats, that count was actually probably pretty accurate. But a 3% manual recount, which could have inspired greater confidence, actually is viewed by many as some of the strongest evidence that the Ohio election was rigged. What what a miscarriage. You know, that's exactly what we don't want audits to be. We don't want audits to be feigning perfection. And it's completely unnecessary. So that's an example of where we're not going. I want to back up for a moment. One of the crucial steps in election transparency happens right on election night and immediately after, which is to get quick counts out there. Lots of people will tell you that exit polls are used all over the world to verify election outcomes. Here's the Carter Center's recommendation on exit polls: avoid exit polls. They let you down when you need them most. The Carter Center's recommendation is quick counts are crucial. Okay, so that's the first line, getting information at the lowest level possible into people's hands so they can start to look at what actually happened. And if your subtotals and totals are a little funky, if they change, when they change, they will change, that gives people who are trying to scrutinize the election some insight into what actually happened. It lets people like me catch your back, which I hope will be useful at some point. It also enables targeted audits, which I don't get to talk about so much, but it's very important. Targeted audits are going to be like hamburger helper in some of these smaller races, like Luther mentioned, where it might not be feasible to have a 95% power audit in all cases. The ability to scrutinize anomalous results is really going to be helpful. One point that I want to underscore is the importance of specifying the procedures in advance. Your citizen observers are going to work with you much more effectively if they have a good idea of what to expect. And of course, in order to come up with procedures that work and make sense to citizens, a lot of advanced work has to be done. I hope it's going to be fun. Election administrators, I think, are pretty used to, it's kind of like sanitation. I mean, either people don't care what you're doing or they really don't want to know. But now you have a moment where people actually are paying attention, and you can build some alliances you wouldn't otherwise have had. Nailing down the chain of custody, that's really important. I hope that's obvious from what I've already said. And unambiguously random samples are really important, and that's why I'm handing over to Arel at this point.